All right, welcome everyone to our very first XojoTalk podcast. This is going to be a regular podcast, probably going to start off monthly, see how things go. And I'm going to invite someone from the Xojo community each time to talk about Xojo, how they use it, technology topics, whatever's of interest to the people that are here. And I'm very pleased to have as my first guest in the very first XojoTalk podcast, Geoff Perlman, founder and CEO of Xojo. Welcome, Geoff.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
Well, we can't have a XojoTalk podcast without having you as our first guest. That would just
So I'm honored.
So I've got a few topics on my list here. We're going to talk for a little bit, not super long. This isn't going to be like a 5-hour commute across country on an airplane podcast. But the first thing that I think people want to hear us chat about a little bit is Xojo for iOS. How's that coming along? And what do we think about it?
Well, I think it's coming along quite well. We're still in alpha, which means that the feature set is not complete yet for what we want to ship for the first release, as you know. Beta means that it's complete. Doesn't mean we've fixed every bug or anything, but it's at least complete. But we're getting close to that point. So I think that's good. I think the big thing that's different about iOS is from a development point of view is auto layout.
Definitely, auto layout takes a little bit getting used to compared to designing your screens for desktop systems.
Yeah, it's interesting because in some ways it's a lot easier. I mean, you just drag your controls onto the layout, and when you align your controls with guides, whether it's for the layout or for other controls, it just sort of automatically does the right thing. Whereas with the current layout editor, and using locking, you really have to do something. There's no locking that happens automatically. So in that respect, it's easier, but it's also, it can do a lot more. So I think it's going to be one of these things where it's going to take a little bit of getting used to. It's not radically different. I've seen other layout systems where they're nothing at all like what we do. And I think auto layout's sort of a nice transition. And I think it's going to solve a lot of problems. And I'm actually looking forward to seeing it get to the point where we have it not just for iOS, but for the web and the desktop eventually as well.
Right. Well, and as you mentioned, it is in alpha testing now, and it has been for a couple months. And
yeah.
And we have our group using it all the time. I certainly run it all the time. I actually have, when it first came out, I sat with my son for a few hours, and we made a version of one of his favorite games, which is that cookie clicker game that he has on his iPad, where it's kind of senseless. You just tap on the screen and the counts increase. But he was adamant that he wanted to make a version of that. So we made one. We used a fish instead of a cookie. We called it Fishy Clicker. And it's an example that we include with the alpha right now.
Did you have him sign an NDA before he showed it to me?
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing that's different with iOS is the new framework. And, for the people who are listening that don't know about this, we were taking this opportunity with iOS to make some changes to the Xojo framework that we otherwise couldn't make. I mean, there's things that we can change, and we can deprecate old things and add new things, or add just new features. But if we want to make some changes, they're not possible to make without breaking code. And that's a big problem for us. And so over the last 15 years, there's just been some, what I like to call cruft, that sort of crept in. Technologies have changed over the years and all that. So the new framework gives us an opportunity to correct some of those things and make it so that essentially this new framework is only for iOS, and then we'll roll it out, in the future for the web and for the desktop. But what I wanted to tell people about the new framework is, and you know this, Paul, it's not radically different from what they've got today. I mean, you still have folder item and text input stream and binary stream and dictionary and, mostly things you're familiar with. We've just taken the opportunity to make some changes to how they work. So I don't think it's going to be a huge transition for people. In fact, I think that just learning to develop an iOS app, because it is different from the way they behave, and the way you create the user experience for an iOS app, regardless of what tool you use, is just different from the desktop or the web. I think the desktop and the web are more similar.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, learning the nuances of how to design and lay out an iOS app probably be a lot trickier than picking up the changes in the framework, which that are largely similar.
Yeah. So I think that's where people are going to have to spend more time, is just, okay, I want to build an app. How is this app going to work? Where am I going to, go from one screen to another? And, where am I going to use tabs and, things like that, split screen, all those UI concepts that don't really have a equivalent for the desktop or the web.
Well, all right. Wait, thank you. That's a great update on iOS, and like Geoff mentioned, it is continuing to progress. It remains in alpha. When it's does move to beta, you can be sure that we'll be setting off horns and fireworks and all kinds of stuff announcing that, and so that our very large contingents of beta testers can start playing around with it. But in the meantime, stay tuned to our Twitter feed, our website, and the forums for tidbits that we may leak out from time to time. All right, well, moving on to other topics. One thing that happened yesterday that caused, I know my son and probably Geoff's son as well, to be a little nervous was Microsoft purchasing Mojang, the makers of the very popular Minecraft game. I believe both our sons are around 10 or 11. My son's 10 anyway. And when he's not doing his homework, he's sitting at the computer playing Minecraft or using his iPad to be playing Minecraft. And so, Geoff, what do you think about this? I mean, Microsoft buying a pretty small independent developer seems a little strange for a lot of money. I believe it was like $2.5 billion.
Yeah. So my son is 11 and my daughter is 13, and she also plays Minecraft. And she has 2 or 3 friends that play. He has 3 friends. In fact, we actually set up a private Minecraft server for them, for my son and his friends, for my daughter and her friends. And so they all have one virtual world that they play Minecraft in. This is actually something I did fairly recently. It's interesting how it seems like boys and girls play Minecraft differently. Boys tend to Minecraft has a creative mode and a sort of game mode, and boys will be in the creative mode to some degree, but they also spend a lot of time in the game mode, whereas at least my daughter and her friends, they seem to spend most of their time in the creative mode. The actual play mode of the game, they're not terribly interested in. My daughter likes to build things.
Yeah, I've seen the same behavior. My daughter does play Minecraft as well, not nearly as much as my son does. But yeah, when she's in there, she's often just making designs or pictures of characters or stuff like that.
Well, in my case, my daughter plays it at least as much, maybe more than my son, but it's all on the creative side. Now, you mentioned them being bought by Microsoft and they're a small company and all that stuff, and yeah, that was interesting. So I'd heard a rumor about this about a week ago, and so to have it official was interesting. Many people don't realize how they know that Minecraft is popular, but they don't understand the business side of it. And from the business side of it, Minecraft, or Mojang is the company. Mojang is a absurdly profitable company. I read that they have 40 employees and they did $100 million last year in profit, not revenue, profit. When Nintendo came out with the Wii, and the Wii was at the height of its popularity, they were doing $1 million a year in revenue per employee, and that was considered fantastic. So you're talking about a company that's doing $100 million a year in profit, and that profit's growing year after year, by the way. And they only have 40 employees. So you're just in an insanely profitable business. So the reason they sold, according to their official statement, is that the founder, who goes by the name Notch, that's his handle, said that the thing has gotten too big and he just doesn't want to be responsible for it. And that it's really not about the money, though. I'm quite certain that the money is at least a part of it, because Notch is the majority shareholder, so he is personally going to pocket over $1 billion from this transaction. But I get the feeling that Notch is more of a developer, and he's a reluctant businessman.
I got that impression as well, reading his little farewell letter that he wrote. He seemed like he was out of his element running a business and did not enjoy it at all.
Yeah, and that's not new. I mean, he has said things like this in the past. So it's not surprising that if Microsoft came along with this offer, he would consider it. I think this is a good time for them to sell in terms of the economy and their level of popularity and things like that. The one thing in the announcement, well, two things in the announcement I wasn't so sure about. One is, in the same breath that they announced that they were being bought by Microsoft, they announced that the three founders are leaving. Now, I don't know, it seems like the Minecraft community would be nervous about anybody buying Minecraft, because Mojang is a very community-centered independent company. But to then have it be Microsoft, and then on top of that, for them to announce in the same breath that the three founders were leaving, that just seems like a bad decision.
That certainly is strange. You don't hear about most acquisitions allowing the founders to leave. They're almost always somehow contractually obligated to stick around for some period of time. So that it is an unusual thing. The funny related story to that is that I was at the mall with my daughter this weekend, and she had to get a present for a birthday party she was going to. And Microsoft just recently put a little mini store in the middle of the mall. It's not a store per se. It's kind of like a giant kiosk. But we walked past it, and they had big displays of Xboxes and then the Microsoft sign. And my daughter looks at that, and she says, "Microsoft makes Xbox?" She had no idea. And and this could be perhaps some of Microsoft's thinking, is that, maybe they want to do some more branding tying or something like that, because, when you do see an Xbox commercial, you rarely see anything about Microsoft related to it. But I don't know. But certainly she thought that was a complete surprise. And then when I told her Microsoft bought Minecraft, that was like, this is the most she's heard of the term Microsoft like in the last 3 days than ever.
Yeah. Well, Xbox is definitely the brand that they push for gaming. They don't brand Microsoft; they really brand Xbox. But yeah, it's interesting because I wonder. Well, part of Notch's explanation for selling is he doesn't want to be responsible for something this big, and that Microsoft was one of the few companies. They are one of the few companies that have the resources to grow it. To handle something this big. And that made me wonder, can it get much bigger? I mean, Mojang doesn't do much in the way of advertising or even marketing. It's all word of mouth. Kids learn about Minecraft from other kids.
Yeah, definitely. Because I hadn't really heard of it until my son came home from school, because other kids had told him about it, and then we had to check it out. I think that maybe Microsoft could do something to make some parts of it a little easier to use. I mean, it is a Java app,
yeah,
which is interesting. But like setting up this server stuff varies depending on levels of difficulty. My son actually uses a portion of his allowance to pay for a server. It's like $7 a month or something like that he and his friends and my daughter use. And then adding things to it like plugins or whatnot are an absolute nightmare. When I set up the server for him, we wanted to put some restrictions on there for friends and whatnot. And I mean, getting all that configured was just horrible. There wasn't like one place you could go to just say, okay, these are the people we can allow in. These are the people we're not allowing in. It was just kind of a nightmare. So maybe Microsoft might be able to help with that and make it even more approachable than it might already be.
Well, so we also have a server, and my kids pay for it out of their allowance, just like your kids do. It depends on the server. If you're setting up your own Minecraft server on your own hardware, yes, it can be complex. There's no doubt about it. We're using Servercraft, and they make it really easy. They provide this great control panel, setting up a whitelist of who can access the server was really easy. Installing plugins was really easy. So I think it depends on which service you use. Now, Mojang provides their own service. It's more expensive, so I don't use it. I believe it's called Realms. And I could see, Microsoft's got Azure. They've got their cloud. They could definitely make it easier. But there's other parts of Minecraft that really need to be made easier, and that is there's unofficial support for mods. Modifications. And I have to tell you, my son wanted me to install some mods, and despite very carefully following instructions from various YouTube videos and web pages and stuff, I could almost never get a mod installed and get it working. I mean, I could install it, but I can almost never get it working. Maps are fairly easy to install if you know where they go, but mods are not. And a lot of mods are incompatible with other mods. And so that's a portion of Minecraft that really needs some attention. It'll also be interesting to see, it's like you said, it's all written in Java. So Java's not a technology that Microsoft spends much time with. They created C# to, become their own version of Java.
You're putting that very politely.
Yeah. I'm being diplomatic, but I suppose they could convert the whole thing if they really wanted to, but it'll just be interesting. So the second aspect of this whole thing is whether or not Microsoft is going to be a good shepherd of Minecraft. And I think that's the overwhelming concern of the Minecraft community. I mean, the Minecraft community has felt pretty comfortable with Mojang being the shepherd. I mean, they created it. And I can think of other companies that might have bought Minecraft at some point who the community might have been more comfortable with. So Microsoft doesn't have a reputation for acquiring products and making them better. They have done that. Most people don't know that Microsoft acquired Visual Basic. Visual Basic wasn't invented at Microsoft. It was created by somebody outside of Microsoft, and they bought it. And they did make it better, but we'll just have to, we'll have to wait and see when it comes to Minecraft.
Yeah, well, definitely be something to keep an eye on, and I'm sure our kids will keep us informed about this. Well, speaking of community-related things, kind of transitioning between Xojo and non-Xojo topics, Geoff and I did want to talk to people and mention that our Xojo Developer Conference is coming up in 2015. And just last week, we announced our call for speakers. And in case you haven't checked out the website, XDC, as we call it, in 2015, next year, is in Austin, Texas. Geoff's stomping grounds. So it's probably, stone's throw from the neighborhood over there. But so that's great. It's a little more central part of the U.S., maybe perhaps a little easier for people to get to. Call for speakers just went up, and we always have wonderful people in our community that are able to come in and talk about stuff that is just fascinating and interesting and great uses of Xojo. So if you haven't seen that or submitted anything, you still have time. You've got till the end of October to submit your topic ideas. But certainly do that, and certainly don't hesitate when you're thinking about registering, because we did end up selling out last year, and this is the place to go to get all this knowledge and meet with other Xojo developers. If you did want to go but waited too long, you'd probably kick yourself.
Yeah, and we have early registration right now, which is a discounted price. We do this every year that we have the conference, so I don't remember when that ends. But if you're considering going, you definitely can save yourself some money by registering early. It's great to have it back in Austin. It's been many years since it's been here. We moved it to Orlando and then to Las Vegas to make it easier for people to get to, especially from Europe. But even in the U.S., some people had complained that getting to Austin, at least back then, was tougher. I think it's gotten a lot easier. Austin's grown considerably. In fact, I was just talking to one of our users who's from Austin but's living in Sweden and has been for, gosh, many, many, many years. And I was we were talking about the Austin skyline, and I was explaining to him how dramatically it's changed. I think those of you who came to the last XDC here in Austin will be surprised at the skyline downtown. There's a lot of new buildings. Looks dramatically different. But one of the pieces of feedback we've gotten over the years is people don't want it to be in a really big hotel. We did it in Vegas, and it was in this huge hotel, and people kind of felt lost. They weren't running into each other as much. Whereas in Orlando, it was a smaller hotel. It worked better. And in Austin, it was usually in a fairly small hotel. So the hotel we've chosen, the Radisson, which is right on the river in downtown, is a small hotel. It'll be easy for people to find each other. And I think it's going to be a great conference. I'm expecting that it's going to be in 2015, and we'll have obviously shipped a version that supports iOS by then that will have a lot of new sessions around iOS. And so I think that's going to make it, the most interesting conference we've had in a long time.
Yeah, that should definitely be a pretty big draw for people.
Yeah.
All right. Well, moving on to what will probably be our last topic for this podcast, but it's not really a small topic, is what on earth is Apple doing? Well, last week they announced all kinds of stuff, and it's always fun to talk about stuff that Apple does. And last week they announced some new iPhones, which are coming out this Friday. That would be September 19th. And they also announced a system called Apple Pay for handling payments using phones. And they also announced, not shipping until sometime next year, something called Apple Watch. Now, for me personally, I love my iPhone. Can't wait to get a new iPhone 6. My contract is up, so I definitely will be getting one of the iPhone 6s. I don't know which yet. I thought I might pre-order one, and then I decided I really don't know which size I want, so I'm going to wait till they show up in the stores, go in there, play around, look at them, and see what fits. I did go to Best Buy this weekend to try out, see what I could find for an Android phone that was about the size of a 6 Plus, so I could see how that felt in my hand. And it turns out the 6 Plus is almost exactly the size of the Samsung Galaxy Note, which comes with a stylus.
Wow. I haven't used a stylus on a smartphone since my Palm Trio.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it's a big device, and so it certainly has left me a little bit paralyzed as to which one I want. And the main reason I want a bigger one is just because my old eyes aren't as good as they used to be, and I've got the font zoomed up quite a bit on my little phone, and I tend to hold it at arm's length more often than I'd like. And I'd really like one that has more easier to read text, if anything else. So we'll see. So I'm waiting until hopefully they don't sell out, and they'll have a few in stock this weekend, and I can go pop in and play around with it and see what they have.
Well, don't be surprised if the iPhone 6 Plus is no easier to read than the iPhone 6, because from the screenshots I've seen and the demo videos and such, it's just more real estate. It doesn't look like the resolution, like the actual height of characters and things is different. I mean,
that's a concern of mine. But I've read there's this feature that I haven't heard too many people talk about. It's something called display zoom, which supposedly will take the iPhone 5 screen size and kind of zoom it up to fill these two new sizes. And if that's not fuzzy or anything, that might be something I like. So I really want to see that in action.
That's interesting. Yeah. I have a 5S. And I seem to recall, I want to say that it was Steve Jobs himself that said this, but I kind of think that he wasn't alive when they announced the iPhone 5. But
No.
maybe he was.
He passed away right around the iPhone 4S announcement, I believe.
Okay. Well, then maybe that's what it was. They were talking about the 4S, and they said, he was being asked, is Apple going to make a bigger phone? Because I think Samsung was already making bigger phones at that point. And he said, this is really about as big as the phone can get and work comfortably in your hand, actually be able to reach things. And then the iPhone 5 came out, and that form factor was a taller phone. And I can reach anything with one hand, but it's sometimes not easy. So then I think about the new iPhone 6, and let's not even talk about the 6 Plus. The iPhone 6 is even taller and
wider.
And wider, and I'm wondering how that's going to feel. So like you, I'm not pre-ordering one. I'm going to go to the store and check it out. But they do have in iOS 8 a one-handed mode, and I've seen that demonstrated, and that's actually a really interesting way to solve the problem. If you double tap on the home button, I believe, what happens is if you're on the home screen, the icons all slide down to be reachable from your thumb. And if you're in an application and you double tap the home button, then the entire layout of the application slides downward so that you can reach the top of the application to press a button. And I believe once you tap, it then slides back up, or maybe you double tap again on the home button. I'm not sure yet, but it seems like they've come up with a good solution for dealing with that. So we'll just have to see. I think you both of us need to see how it feels.
Right, yeah. I certainly be interested to see how that works in practice. I did go through the trouble of downloading those templates that people made that you can print to show you the actual sizes of the phones to compare.
Oh, I haven't seen those.
Yeah, I've got little cutouts. I'll show them to Jeff, but people on the podcast won't see them. But I got little cutouts of the two phones that I've been carrying in my pocket and stuff to see how they feel. But I don't think that if I go into the Apple store, they're probably not going to be too keen on people shoving phones in their pockets to see how comfortable they are. But that's pretty key. You walk around with this in your pocket. You don't want to really have it be bothering you. So,
well, one of the things that they're doing in iOS 8 is they're making the fingerprint sensor available to third-party developers. And I'm really looking forward to that because I use 1Password, and that and other apps where I have to frequently type a password in, it's really annoying knowing that I have this feature that makes the whole password thing a non-issue, but my apps can't use it. So I'm looking forward to, and I've seen demo videos of 1Password using the fingerprint sensor, so I'm really looking forward to that. That'll be a great feature. They're adding near-field communications, and that's for Apple Pay. And I just read today or yesterday, I think it was yesterday, that near-field communications will only be available for Apple Pay. It's not going to be available to third-party developers. However, if you consider the fingerprint sensor, and that wasn't initially available to third-party developers either, it won't surprise me at all if a year from now, Apple, makes the near-field communication stuff available. They might not, but I think they probably will. I'm also interested to see what the adoption rate is going to be like with iOS 8, because I was just reading this morning that iOS 7, after 10 months of being out, is at 90% adoption. Now, Paul, I think you'd agree with me on this. One of the big hindrances for iOS 7 would be, wow, this is a pretty different user experience. I mean, they changed the look and feel of a lot of things, and that would, some people are like, great, it looks great, can't wait to switch. Other people are going to be, well, this is kind of different, I'm not sure I want to do that. And yet the adoption rate's been pretty good. But going from 7 to 8, the UI hasn't really changed. So I would think that the adoption rate would be even faster, simply because you're not asking users to adapt to something radically new.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, when I installed iOS 8, I got the developer version running on one of my iPads here, and unless you're looking for things, you wouldn't know that it's running iOS 8. It looks exactly the same. The keyboard has a few different things that are probably the most obvious thing that catch your eye, but there's no, big thing that jumps out at you when you're running it. It was almost a little disappointing when you installed it. But on the other hand, that's good, because if a lot of the stuff's under the hood changes, particularly these extensions, I think that's what they might be called, that allow 1Password to work. Stuff like that's just going to make the devices more useful. And yeah, I imagine when this thing comes out tomorrow, people are going to be all over it and bogging down servers and doing the things that the Apple faithful tend to do.
Yeah, I saw that Apple announced that in the first 24 hours of pre-orders, they got twice as many pre-orders for iPhone 6 as they had got for iPhone 5, which is really amazing. I mean, Apple is an extraordinarily large company, and it's not easy for companies their size to grow. Warren Buffett said, if my portfolio was only $1 million, I could, quadruple it very, very quickly. But his portfolio isn't $1 million. It's billions of dollars. And so that's hard for him to actually grow it very much at all. And big companies have the same problem. And then, and the iPhone is obviously very, very successful. And to have it, have the pre-orders double from the iPhone 5 is really kind of remarkable.
Yeah, well, especially from my perspective in the past, it's always been easy to know which phone you want to order. I've ordered them several times. They really only have one new model. That's the top level model. So that's the one you order. But this time with the two that you don't really have any frame of reference around, I would have thought more people would have been like me and want to maybe wait and see so that they pick the right one. Because at least in the United States, where you're kind of stuck with this thing for a couple of years because you're on a contract typically. And it's not all that easy to switch it out. So you want to make sure you make the right choice. So I didn't. I'm a -1 on the pre-orders this year, although I pre-ordered the last two iPhones I've done.
Yeah, that is interesting. So it is kind of amazing to see them the pre-orders be so popular for that reason, and like I said, just because they've sold so many, it's just incredible to see that. Apple Pay is really interesting. I think it's going to take several years for Apple Pay to get to the point where you can use it so much that I was thinking about this. What you want to do with Apple Pay for it to really work is you want to reach the point where your instinct is to pull your phone out of your pocket rather than your wallet. If you pull your wallet out and then you go, oh, look, they've got, the device for doing Apple Pay. Well, then you have to put your wallet back and get your phone out. Now you're just doing it because you can. But if it's prevalent enough that you just instinctively pull out your phone, then that's going to work. And I realized the timing for Apple is really good. Apple in the past got asked, hey, why aren't you guys just doing near field communication like Android? Android's had it since 2010. And Phil Schiller, who's the VP of marketing at Apple, said, well, we're not sure that near field communication is the right way to go and all this stuff. But what's happened is Apple has waited until the US is mandating the change in retail credit card equipment. And so retailers are going to be getting new equipment anyway, and right. They'll be getting the equipment that Apple needs for Apple Pay to work with near field communication. So I think they were probably waiting for that rather than anything else.
Well, I look forward to the day when I don't need to drag my wallet around anymore. I actually have a special wallet case that I put my iPhone in when I head out, so that I remember to take my wallet, because I never leave without my phone, but I often will run out of the house without my wallet.
That's interesting. Yeah. I like the idea of, the payment system being really smooth. I especially like the idea of there not being as much fraud. Most people don't realize that 50% of the credit card fraud in the world occurs in the United States, and we don't have 50% of the credit cards. So other countries like Canada, for example, they already have a more secure form of payment. They have credit cards that have the chip in them, and you just slide the chip, or you I think you just motion it near the device. I'm not sure. I don't have one of those cards, but it's a more secure form of communication, and we've just been laxed moving to that, I guess, in the U.S. And now we finally are. Apple Pay is also apparently going to work with websites. So you'll be able to, if you have an e-commerce site, you'll be able to accept payment through Apple Pay, which is kind of interesting too. So
yeah, that should be nice, because right now, if you have to go and type in all your credit card stuff each time, I do have all that stuff in 1Password, so it's a little easier, but a lot of people don't. So then they got to get up from the computer, go find where their wallet might be, grab the card, come in, type it all in. And by that point, they'll be like, the heck with it. I'll do this later.
Yeah. So making the payment system really, really smooth is, going to help people pay. And it's going to, like you said, you don't want anything to block a payment. So you want to make that really smooth. Apple negotiated with them. They negotiated with MasterCard and Visa at a pretty good rate as well. So Apple makes point zero, I don't know, 0.00015% or something. It's 15 cents for every $100 purchased Apple's going to make. And you'd think, wow, that could be a lot of money. Yeah, it'll be, some good bank for Apple, and it's all profit, and all that. But it's not as much as you'd think. I calculated it out, and if every single credit card transaction went through Apple, and it's not going to, not even remotely close to that, they would make about $9 billion a year from that. Now you think, wow, $9 billion, that's a lot of money. But that's really not moving the needle a whole lot for Apple.
Right, yeah, they probably get that much in loose change in the office couch.
Yeah, right, between the cushion seats. So I don't think that's the issue. I think what it is, Apple's a hardware company. They're not a software company. They're really not a content company, despite iTunes and being able to rent movies and all that stuff. If you think about Apple as a software company, as a hardware company, not a software company, then everything they do really makes a lot of sense. To me, Apple Pay is about selling iPhones. They're going to make a lot more money selling more iPhones with Apple Pay than they will make on fees that they collect from transactions.
Right. Yeah, and it becomes another big upgrade point too, because it only works with the iPhone 6s.
That's right.
So if you want to get in on that wave, you're going to have to need one of the newer phones, and that's what Apple wants you to get anyway, is their newer stuff. So. Yeah,
because it's got the near field communication technology in it. I mean, the iPhone 5, that technology is just not there. So,
well, and speaking of the newer stuff, their absolute newest thing they announced was this watch, which everyone expected them to announce. Surprisingly, they did not call it the iWatch, which is fine with me, but calling it Apple Watch is a little weird as well. And much like, I guess, even when the original iPhone was announced, I wasn't like, ooh, I got to get me one of those, because at that time, I don't even think I carried around a phone regularly. And I probably had a cell phone, but it was just a cheapo, flip phone kind of thing that probably wasn't with me most of the time. And I waited a couple of years before the iPhone all of a sudden became the ultimate pocket computer that I had to have with me all the time. And I don't wear a watch. I haven't worn a watch in like 15 years. So Apple coming out with a watch right now, I'm like, I don't know. There's not enough there yet for me to want to wear a watch again.
Well, I'll say this. So I came to iPhone from a different place. I had a Palm Trio, so I had I had a Palm Pilot before that. I had a Palm Trio, and I carried that around with me. And I'd heard that the iPhone, I'd heard the rumors back in like September of 2006, I think it was, that Apple was coming out with a phone. And I suspected that Apple, if they came out with a phone, would do a pretty good job. So I actually bought a whole bunch of Apple stock at 78, which has turned out to be a really good thing. But I didn't buy an iPhone. And the reason I didn't buy an iPhone is because I had been using a smartphone, the Palm Trio, for several years. I had become accustomed to having certain features, and the original iPhone didn't have the features I needed. I mean, it had a lot of them, but there were things that I was dependent upon that it did not have. And so for me, I had to wait until the iPhone reached the point where, I made a list of features. And I basically said, okay, I'm going to wait till the iPhone has these. And once it did, and that was with the iPhone 3GS, I think it was 3S, 3GS, 3G, I don't know, whatever, iPhone 3. That's when the features I needed were there. So that's when I switched over to the iPhone. And you're right. I know where you're going with this. The iPhone is like, now it's a pocket computer. They call it a phone, and it is a phone. There's no question about that. But it's so much more than, a phone. And yet that's what we call it.
Yeah, just this summer, I finally realized that I hardly ever use mine as an actual phone. And I took the phone icon out of the iPhone dock and stuck it into a folder somewhere. And I put the messages icon in the dock, because I actually use that way more than I use the phone piece. Yeah, it is called a phone, but I still refer to it as my awesome pocket computer that I carry around with me all the time.
Now, I use my phone quite a bit because it's the only phone I have. I haven't had we haven't had a home phone in more than 10 years. So we've only had our cell phones. So I do use it quite a bit. But going back to the Apple Watch, I saw a guy who's from that industry. I don't know if he writes about reviews about watches because, like you, I don't wear a watch. But he said the Apple Watch goes on your wrist and it does tell time, but that's where the similarities to a normal watch end. And his feeling was there's a whole category of watches in the $350 range, and that the Apple Watch is going to compete very, very well with watches that cost $350. Obviously, there's going to be a more expensive. There's the Apple Watch Edition, which I'm not a watch guy, so I don't get that name. That doesn't make sense to me.
Right? Yeah, that just seems like weirdness.
Yeah, but it's 18 karat gold plated, and it's probably. I mean, my guess is it's going to be $1,500, $2,000, something like that, and it's probably only going to be sold in high-end watch stores. I think you could probably buy one in an Apple store, but I bet you they don't even have it in stock. They'll probably have to order it for you or something.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and a lot of this goes to just my ignorance about watches in general. I don't know. I mean, what does a watch cost? I don't know. I've never shopped for a watch. I don't.
Well, you can spend any amount of money you want. You can get a watch for $10, and you can get a watch for $10,000 and up.
Well, I do know that unusually my wife, when she saw this Apple Watch announcement, was like gushing. She's like, I want one of those. I got to have one of those. But, it took me a while to convince her she should probably have an iPhone, because she was like, what do I need that for? I don't need that. But she's a runner, and she does wear a watch, and, her phone is often left places, in her purse or on a desk or somewhere. Whereas this watch thing might be with her all the time and would be more accessible. So she was like, that sounds like something I think I might rather have.
I'm curious to see how well the Apple Watch works when your iPhone's not around. In your wife's case, if she doesn't have one at all, I just wonder how functional it'll be. But for people that do have one, I wonder how much you can use it when your iPhone's not, when it's not paired to your iPhone.
Right, which brings up, we don't really know a lot about this watch at this point. It was a very high level demo from Apple. They're not saying a heck of a lot. They didn't say the battery life. They left out, like you said, how it requires an iPhone, but to what extent. Tim Cook revealed that I saw some of his Charlie Rose interview over the weekend, and he revealed that you can put some music on it, so you can listen to music and it'll work with Bluetooth headphones. So that's all good, but the specifics haven't been announced yet.
Yeah, they didn't say, they weren't real specific about battery life. They said that they implied that you would charge it once a day. You charge it at night, but I suspect that they're going to try and improve that before they ship it. Motorola came out with a smart watch, I guess you'd call it, just a week before Apple. And the reviews have not been good because they said you have to charge it twice a day to use it. And I just can't see anybody using a watch that has to be charged in the middle of the day. I just don't see how that works. But
yeah, that would seem weird. I mean, you want it to be with you all the time and on you all the time. That's how you're going to get use from it. So if you have to go through the trouble of taking it off in the middle of the day, maybe you won't put it back on, and maybe you'll stop using it and not find it useful.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to take it off at night anyway. So
right.
When you charge it, that's not an issue for anybody, I don't think. But if you have to take it off, like you said, in the middle of the day, that's a problem. Now, the Apple Watch is a brand new sort of platform. And if you think back, let's think back to 2007 when the iPhone came out, right? It was this kind of really new thing. I mean, it had no physical keyboard, it had software keyboards, and that was a big deal. It had this huge screen, and it was really new and all that. But if you and now a lot of other phones, Android phones, really kind of took that same approach. But the iPhone does a lot more today than it ever did when it first came out. And my thinking is with the Apple Watch is that we're at that same point. The Apple Watch is, we've got an idea about what it is at this point, but this is just the very beginning. I think we're going to see all kinds of really innovative applications for it. Apple obviously will come out with new versions of it with more capabilities, just as they have done with the iPhone. So a lot of people look at it and say, why would I want that? And, I don't see the point. But I honestly think we're at that same place. I mean, I immediately thought of all of the applications you could do with something that is aware of the motion of your arm. For example, I can totally see an app that helps you work on your golf swing or your tennis swing, right? If that information is available. There'll be all
use one for my tennis swing, definitely.
Yeah, see? They say that it understands when you're tilting your wrist towards your face, and that's when the display comes on. That's how they save the battery. Well, that's a tremendous amount of information about the orientation of the watch. They said that in the health app that because it's got a barometer, you'll get credit for walking upstairs, whereas right now the iPhone can't tell that. Well, that's a whole new bit of information that we didn't have before. So I think the Apple Watch, we're going to see it doing a lot of really interesting things in the years ahead. I think we have to just kind of wait and see. And I know a lot of Xojo users are thinking, well, am I going to be able to write applications for the Apple Watch? And, we don't have access to the software yet, the Watch Kit, it's called. But we're going to certainly look at that once it's available. And if we can support it, it's something we'll seriously consider supporting. So just as the Apple Watch is this new platform, iOS for Xojo is going to be new. And the initial version, won't have every single feature that you can possibly think of for iOS, but we'll keep building on that with each release as time goes on. And Paul, I know you already know this, but for everyone else, we'll support declares. So if there's something that we don't support for iOS initially, there's a very good chance that you'll be able to do declares into the iOS framework and do it yourself. And I suspect we're going to see a lot of third-party classes becoming available for Xojo in a very short period of time to add functionality that we don't have built in the initial release.
Well, that's good to point out. Well, well, certainly Xojo for iOS, certainly something to keep your eye on, and the Apple Watch. It always pays to keep an eye on stuff Apple announces. They're quite the juggernaut these days. All right, well, I think we're about out of time here for our first podcast, so I want to again thank Geoff, Xojo founder and CEO, for chatting with me here for this afternoon.
You're welcome, Paul.
And we'll talk to everyone again next month.